Welcome to Before the Work Begins with me, Jo Hutton, senior yoga teacher and author of best-selling Substack Yoga for Tired People. And in this podcast, we speak to the movers, the shakers and the creatives and find out what they are doing before the work begins. Are they really getting up at 5 a.m. and taking cold plunges, or are they just trying to get by like the rest of us? I hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to Before the Work Begins, and I am joined by the amazing Maisie Hill, and I would love it if you could introduce yourself, Maisie, for the people who don't know your incredible work.
Yeah, well, I am an author. I've written 3 best-selling books. The first one was Period Power. Second was Perimenopause Power, and then the third one is Powerful. And my background prior to what I currently do was working as an acupuncturist and practitioner, doing a variety of things for many years, and also being a birth doula. And really for, 15 or so years, I was really involved in helping with reproductive health in some form, whether it was treating people with cycle-based issues, fertility, pregnancy issues, or postnatal perimenopause. So I was just really in the business of ovaries and wombs and women's health. And then I went on to write my books, but that really coincided with a career shift for me into life coaching, which is what I do now. I have a membership called Powerful and a podcast called The Maisie Hill Experience. So you can find me there.
So you've really had quite a number of careers in your life then. So I imagine that your mornings must have changed quite a bit over the years. Is it possible for you to break down how a normal morning would, a normal in inverted commas, look for you now in this stage in your life?
Yeah, it made me laugh hearing you say that, because I also had a career prior to doing that in my very early 20s where I managed an infamous rock bar in Soho in London.
Did you?
And that closed at 3 a.m. So, my shifts have shifted. Yeah, so these days, I like to go early to bed with a good book, and I'm early to rise. So typically at the moment, it's mid-April when we're recording this. So we're getting some sunlight in the morning. So I'm usually waking up as the sun's starting to come through the windows, I just love that, especially after the winter. And pretty much I like to work as soon as I can. Like, my ideal scenario is get a pot of black coffee on. I feel quite alert in the mornings. Today's a bit different because we actually didn't get home until 1 a.m. last night, which...
Were you doing something fun?
We went to see England v Spain, the Lionesses, play in their World Cup qualifier. So this is very different morning for me. I didn't wake up until 8.
That's such a lion.
Oh, gosh. So... yeah, usually I'm just alert and I want to get on it. But, of course, there's family stuff to take care of, kids wanting breakfast, school runs, that kind of thing. But I had to really confront that in myself, acknowledging that mornings are my peak time for creativity, for writing and creating things. And I had to really learn how to prioritize that, which meant conversations with my kid, conversations with my partner, his dad, about how we do things in the morning as a family to set things up so that I can have that time protected. So I like to do a good kind of 3-4 hours work. Sometimes I'll do a bit of work in the morning and then, take my son to school or something and then do another bit, because when it's really light in the summer, I can get that kind of hour-long stretch maybe before he's even awake, which for me, that is the dream. If I'm awake before anyone else in the household and no one's talking, no one's even looking at me, that is that's my dream scenario. I can just have a coffee and I can write.
Did you have to do any inner work around not feeling guilty about being productive in the morning? Because I know that a lot of the advice around is have a slow morning, and I'm very like you, Maisie. I wake up ready to go, and I had to really negotiate with myself around not feeling guilty about the fact that all of the advice is slow, don't start straight away. Did you have any of that?
No, just like, whatever, this is what works for me. But I think it's different, because even in my books I've written about, how do you approach your mornings? But I think that's the key. It's not necessarily what you're doing, it's how you're approaching things, which leads to you doing stuff. So for sure, back in my acupuncture days, I had clients who were waking up and like getting on it right away, but they were doing it in a very stressed, rushing way. So for sure, for someone like that, it'd be like, well, that's not going to be great for your cortisol levels at that time in the morning. So how about we work on you having a slower approach, etc., etc. But for me, like, there's no stress involved. I'm just awake, alert, ready to go, and just want to get to it. So I just skipped all of that. But definitely in terms of my inner work and things, it was really just around, well, is it okay for me to take this time for myself when my kid wants his breakfast? Is it okay for me to just swan off out the door when there's stuff going on? It was around that.
And do you feel like you have a bit of a rebellious streak in you, because all of the jobs that you said, if you're not in from the birth world, you might not know how rebellious you need to be in the birth world. But I was a pregnancy yoga teacher for quite a long time, so I get it. But all of the jobs that you mentioned there, they definitely have a very strong, self-directed, strong in your own inner voice. Is that something that you've always had?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. Like, I do not like being told what to do. Like, even if it's something I want to do and I've already decided that I'm going to do something, if someone goes, oh, you should do this, I'm like, well, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that now that you've told me that I should be doing it. So I definitely have that kind of inner resistance and rebelliousness, for sure. But sometimes it's also that I can just see a really effective, efficient way of doing things, and I want to just cut straight to the chase and get it done. That's certainly how my autistic brain works. But, sometimes people have other approaches and things, and I can just, like, it's very clear to me that's not working, let's do it this way. And so I think I can use that rebelliousness in it. I can channel it into something. Some people just kind of like seem to be rebellious for the sake of it, and it's not getting used to do anything. I think that is really important.
Do you feel like you have a calling to share something?
Oh God, yeah. Yeah.
What is at the core of that, do you think? What's at the core of what you wanting to share, or has it changed over the years?
I can remember back when I was doing a diploma in nutritional therapy, and one day, it was just, we might have been learning about B vitamins or something like that, and then the lecturer just said, she started talking about how purpose is really important in your life, and she asked the class, like, does anyone know what their purpose is? And I was the only one who put my hand up. And even she seemed quite surprised. I think, when the lecturer's got their style of doing things and they're used to no one having an answer. Yeah. And then she was like, oh, someone's actually got an answer. And she said, what is it? And I said, well, I want to help women feel more at home in themselves. So whether that was, at the time for me, to do with reproductive health and to do with the childbirth year, I think that has remained, but it's moved more into mindset and how you approach having feelings as a human in life. And, it's grown more into that. But I think that at the core of it is I really want women to have a really decent, respectful relationship with themselves. And that's at the heart of everything I do. But I absolutely love teaching. So it's hard for me not to teach.
And why women? What was it about helping women? Because there's lots of different people that you could help. There's lots of, you could do animals, you could do but what is it about women that's made you think that's where my calling is?
I mean, I have to say, it never occurred to me that it would be anything other than women. And, for me, that also encompasses people that have been socialised as female, who are trans and non-binary. I was raised pretty much by my mum. I saw the issues she had as she went and did all of that. And then, you know, my period pain was really debilitating. So I guess I've kind of got a bit of a baptism of fire in terms of my own experience of my cycle with period pain, but also real struggles premenstrually. Very harsh inner critic. So I think it's really all been born out of the work that I've done on myself, and then the skills and the tools and qualifications I picked up along the way as a result of trying to help myself out, really. And then, you know, once you've had such an incredible experience of that, and if you have that teacher element inside of you, then you want to spread the word and help other people.
And at what point did you think, I'm going to write a book? What gave you the audacity? And I say that in the best possible way. What gave you the audacity to write a book?
I really think I've always had it, you know, and I know lots of people kind of grow up thinking, oh, I'd love to write a book. You know, it's quite an aspirational thing to do for someone to say they want. But I can remember a teacher back in junior school saying to me, Maisie, you know, she was asking me, what do you want to, you know, what would you want to be when you grow up? And it must have only been like my son's age. I wouldn't have been, you know, must have been like 10 years old or something. But she said to me, you know, you could have something to do with books. But, you know, I was also like, when there was an inset day at junior school, I would still go in and organise all the books in the library and put them in numerical order, like, you know, all the numbers. I mean, talk about like early signs of autism that were missed. But books were always like my comfort, whether I was reading them, whether I was in libraries, you know, I just love books, and I love reading out loud, you know, so it was just, I think she really sowed an early seed. But then with all the work I did with clients over the years, you know, there's only so many times that you can draw the same diagram for someone and explain it, and they take it away and say, do you mind if I tell my sister about this? And then, you know, you get the idea, well, I'll do a workshop or something. And I started doing that, and it was just like, people were just desperate for it. And then, so I was thinking, oh, I want to write a book. And I was writing blog posts and things. Not as many as I wanted to, because my son was, I think he must have been about a year old then. And I remember saying to my partner at the time, okay, I want to take some time at the weekend when you're off work. And I think I managed about 8 blog posts. It was just, I hadn't got the internal resilience to really claim that for myself. So I said that's what I wanted to do, but it was like I was waiting for permission from him to say, oh yeah, that's fine, off you go. Or, well, it's 11 o'clock, why don't you go out of the door? So it's kind of what in that, I think, quite internal postnatal space, and hadn't really got to grips with the relationship with the creativity, the relationship with myself, my relationship with my partner, my kid, you know, it was kind of all, I was like really in it. And so I didn't end up writing many blog posts, but one did extremely well and got shared, and it was titled What That Wet Patch in Your Knickers Is All About. You can see why it did well. And that actually ended up being the title for one of the chapters in Period Power. But then I ended up having a publisher just come to me and say, you know, she knew me through me being a practitioner. She's like, we're really interested in you writing a book for us, a big publishing house. Like, can we come down and talk to you about it? And I was like, oh God, what do I do now? So thankfully I had an author friend who was published. So I spoke to her and she was like, get an agent, whatever you do, get an agent. And she introduced me to her agent, and we took things from there. So it felt like there was a great momentum building in me. And then, you know, things just started happening from there.
And were you surprised by the reaction to Period Power? Because it has sold like hundreds of thousands of copies. It's all over the world. Like people, I remember when it was released, and there was a real buzz. Women were giving it to each other. Like there was book clubs. It was definitely a book where people read, and then they were like, right, you need to read this. Is that something that you were expecting, or did that catch you by surprise?
Yeah, I mean, I expected it. So I remember in that kind of week of waiting for offers and having these conversations, I remember just thinking, I'd rather turn these all down and self-publish, because I just had a level of conviction in me that it has to be this way and we need this. Like, it has to be out there, because of course I had all the evidence from everyone else that I'd ever taught this stuff to. It was like, a revelation for them. So I had the internal belief in it, and also some external evidence of, smaller data points for sure, but of it being received very positively. So it didn't really take me by surprise.
And what was your writing schedule like back then when you wrote that first book? What was that like then? Was that in the morning as well?
Oh God, it's different to what it is now for sure. So when I first started writing the proposal, I remember my agent being like, okay, do you think you can get a proposal done by Christmas? And this was in like October or something. And my son was just starting to settle at nursery. And I was thinking, flipping heck, yes. I was just like, whatever, I'll just say yes. And so my son was settling at nursery. That took ages. And so then he was doing 2 mornings. I wouldn't be starting until like 9:30, 9:15. And then I'd have to be finishing, at 11:30 to go and pick him up again. So it was really scrappy, I would say. But also I was up breastfeeding him at night, and I would say a lot of the writing happened in my head. And I've noticed this when I am coaching people on some kind of creative process, whether they are writers or they're artists in some way, is that they're like, well, they equate being creative to the time that you're at your laptop or the time you're in front of your easel. And I was saying, yeah, but what about all the rest of the time, when you're walking around, when you're in the shower, when you're doing the dishes, when you're on a drive, when you're up feeding your toddler at 2 a.m? They are the times when I'm doing a lot of the writing. I do need to make notes of the ideas I have, though, because I think that was one of the hardest things with period power. I'd go to bed at night and then I'd think, oh yeah, that's such a good idea, there's no way I'm going to forget that, and not get up and jot it down. And then I'd never remember it in the morning. It would never come back to me. So to begin with, it was a struggle. And then when I got the book deal, Bloomsbury, who were just amazing, they're like the best publishers, I love them, they said, okay, your deadline will be in 18 months' time. And my agent and I were like, no, it has to come out sooner than that. And in the world of publishing, there's actually certain periods in the year where certain types of books come out. And so for like self-improvement of some kind, it's typically, if it's not New Year's, then it's the spring, like kind of April, May. So they said, well, if you want to get it done sooner, that means it has to be done by, I think it was either the end of May or end of June, it had to be done. And this was February, towards the end of February, when the deal was done. And I was like, okay, like, let's just do that then. But I have to say, my people really rallied around me.
Do you think having that physical embodiment of the female experience, you were literally breastfeeding, you were looking after a small child, do you think that helped put a fire up your bum that this work is so important? Did it help you get that out?
Yeah, and I think, that was really imbued in period power. I think sometimes I think about, if I had taken 18 months, would it be the same book? And I really don't think it would be. I think the short timeline, and also I think it's like 120 something thousand words. It was only meant to be 60 to 70. So it was like, not just a short timeline, but I wrote, double the amount it was meant to be. But I was so fired up. And I actually think that all the kind of creative frustration of the previous year of wanting to write and not being able to write I think it's like it had revved. It's, you know, it was like a coil, or like some kind of energy inside me was just accumulating. And then, you know, finally take your foot off the brake, you know, and you just go like top acceleration. So that's how it really felt inside me. That, you know, there were certain elements in period power that I just really, really believed in. So yeah, I was just very fired up for the writing of that.
And at the end of period power, so it had all gone out into the world, how did you feel creatively? Did you feel like, oh, I'm done, that I have not another word left in me? Or were you like, I have so much more to say? Was writing your next book, did it come as easily as period power?
That's an interesting question. I don't think it had occurred to me that I would write more than one book. You know, I put everything into period power. I thought I'd put everything into period power. And then I thought, right, that's done. And, you know, at the same time, I was running my business and building the membership and, you know, helping everyone in there, building my coaching practice. So I just kind of thought, well, that's what I'm going to do. But then I just started getting messages from women saying, what about perimenopause? Like, what happened? Like, I love period power, but what happens next, kind of thing. And I just got so many messages that were similar to that I just started thinking, maybe I need to write that book next, which was an interesting place for me to be, because I was, you know, in the very beginnings of that perimenopause transition. So then I had to kind of work my way through the, who am I to write a book about this topic when I haven't had the full experience myself, and, you know, to challenge myself and coach myself through that, which I did. Writing perimenopause power, that was another challenging deadline because it was similar timeline, and my mum had died, so I was still like grieving her. And then the first lockdown started, and then, you know, suddenly I've got a 4-year-old at home and a massive deadline to write. And so that was a totally different writing experience. Yeah.
In what ways was it different?
I love uninterrupted long stretches of time where I can go into deep focus. And, you know, sometimes I'd spend 2 days working on 2 pages, you know, the really scientific stuff, to really be able to explain it in an accurate way that someone can also understand without getting too lost in the details of the science. And so suddenly, like, having 10-minute snatches of time to try and do that was really challenging. I picked up a great tip from some other mums early on. I heard them on a podcast talking about this, and they said, just have post-it notes on a wall with tasks that would take you 10 to 15 minutes. And then as soon as your kid is doing something, by the way, my kid is not one of those kids who has ever just played by himself. You know, people are like, oh, just set him up with something. I'm like, he doesn't do that. That's just not him. So, but, you know, once in a while he would just be watching something or whatever. So they said, you know, just go to the wall and pick off a post-it note. Don't spend the 10 minutes you have thinking about what should I be doing. Just have a variety of topics. So I made my post-it notes of just paragraphs. Okay, so I need to write a paragraph about this. I need to do this. And so I wrote the book in a really haphazard way. There was no like working my way through a chapter. It was just like, oh, I need to write something about that for this chapter. Write that. Editing it was a complete nightmare.
And can we speak a little bit about the editing process? Because I think when people imagine writing a book, they see the visible bit of actually putting the words on page, but they don't see the months of waiting, the months of nothing. How did you deal with, because you seem someone who's very active and productive, how did you deal emotionally with the downtime when you were waiting for edits back and waiting for sales to come out and the waiting time?
Well, I mean, I think the editing process, it is this kind of weird in between place where, you know, there's suddenly like you do this full on effort, and then there's like 2-3 weeks of nothing, and then you don't really know what you're going to be getting back and what level of work is going to be involved in that. And my editors have just always been fantastic and asked really great questions. And, you know, sometimes I'd be like, I don't think it's worth me answering that question, because if I do, I'm going to need to write another 5 pages. And I don't think the reader is going to benefit from those extra 5 pages. And that they would really trust me with that. So I had a great relationship with them. But the in-between time, I guess for me, because I'm so used to working with my cycle and accounting for varieties of how I'm feeling in terms of mood and energy levels, that it's quite easy for me when there are those lulls to go with them. But that said, I was also, you know, building an online business at the time, because I transitioned from being a practitioner into having an online coaching membership. So, you know, it wasn't like I handed the book in and then I just sat on the sofa for however many weeks. It was like, okay, now it's time to do something in the business. So yeah, it was a very creative period of time in lots of ways, not just with the writing.
And how did you cope with that transition between having an in-person business, so seeing people all of the time, being in the minutiae of their lives, maybe seeing the same person week after week, and, you know, having that real tangible community, to being online where, yes, there is absolutely a community, but it's a very different makeup of your day. How did you deal with that transition?
Yeah, it's really different, because especially with the membership model, so transitioning from being a practitioner, which is one-on-one, I always had quite long appointment times with my clients, just by the necessity of things that needed to be spoken about, and as well as the actual treatment. So it's a lot of contact time. And then there's the kind of bit of admin or like social media, but it was like in the minority. Whereas a membership is literally the reversal of that. So even now, like in coaching time in a membership, I'll do 1 or 2 calls a week. So it's less coaching time, but then there's the like running a team, creating assets for the membership in terms of like, I'm always creating courses or webinars to teach the clients in there, creating the podcast every week, the email I send out every week. You know, there's a lot of writing involved with how I do things, at least. So yeah, it is a big reversal, but I have to say, I think it really suits being autistic. I was talking with another autistic colleague of mine, also a coach, and I said, you know what, memberships are really great for autistic people, because, not speaking for every autistic person in the world, but on the whole, we, you know, like to have a lot of alone time. So actually, for me, if I was to have a completely one-on-one coaching practice, this is something I struggled with a bit as an acupuncturist, it's a lot of time with people. And, you know, at least when I was treating people, there'd be the time that I'm talking, and then there's the quiet time where they're resting or sleeping whilst they're being treated. So I get that kind of social downtime within the treatment. But whereas with coaching, it's a lot of talking. So I've got a limit on how much I can do that. So even though I'm a really skilled coach and I really love it, and I've got the most amazing clients, there's still a limit on how much I can do without going into kind of social burnout from it. So for me, I think I've thrived with it, because actually it means I get to do the coaching that I love, but then I get to do the same thing that I did with my books, which is think, what can I come up with from like the experience I'm having of coaching people? Is when you've got hundreds of people, like you're seeing the patterns on a really big scale. So I would like coach people and be like, oh, that's coming up here, and this person. And I'd be like, okay, what webinar can I teach that's going to help everyone with this issue? Or what podcast can I record that's going to help with it? So I think it's worked really, really, really well for me. I love it.
And what about autism diagnosis? Was this a late diagnosis, or have you always known?
No, I didn't always know. It was I'm trying to think, maybe like around the time Period Power came out, and I had no idea whatsoever. But now that I know, it's like, oh yeah, that was actually very, very obvious.
What made you, if you didn't know, what was the catalyst for you to go and get diagnosed then?
Yeah, there was someone that I had done a training with as a practitioner, and we'd become friends on Facebook, and she was posting a lot about autism in females, and I read one of the articles that she posted, and I thought, oh God, I've got a real professional blind spot here, because I didn't know that it can there's like autistic traits that are very different in women. So I thought, oh, I need to do a bit of research just so that I'm more educated professionally. So I went off and started reading. As I was reading it, I was like, this is sounding pretty familiar. And then I found this one list of traits in women, and I read it to my partner. I didn't tell him what it was, but I just read it to him. And he was like, I don't know what this is, but this sounds like you. And I was like, it's actually about autism in women. And he was like, really? And I was like, yeah. So I then I just went off and read more and felt quite secure in knowing that I was autistic. And then I thought, well, I do want to talk about this publicly. And for me personally, I think particularly because of all the attention that period power had got, and, some of it negative attention as well, I really felt like in order for me to speak publicly about it, which I wanted to do, that I needed to get a professional diagnosis and have it confirmed. So I went through that process as well. And then as soon as he said, he was like, you're way above the threshold for the diagnosis. It's like, it's not like you're just meeting the threshold, you are way beyond it. But he said, you've just done a great job of curating your life to work with your autism. So yeah, as soon as he told me, then I stuck a post up straight away and started talking about it, which has been really great. When you get a message, I got a message from a 63-year-old woman saying, I heard your podcast talking about it, went off and did my own research, and I've just had my assessment and had it confirmed that I'm also autistic. And when you get messages like that, it's just absolutely incredible. So yeah, I like talking about it.
It's funny, that judgment, isn't it? We have a lot of neurodiversity in my family, and when members of my family started getting diagnosed, there was definitely a well, no, that's just the way everyone is.
Yeah.
You can't be autistic. Everybody's like that. And then you're like, oh, no, wait. Oh, wait.
Yeah, exactly. There's like days when it can really affect me in challenging ways, but I think those sensitivities also really serve me in other ways. So I think it gives me a very rich experience of life. But I have to say, my autism isn't an issue until I'm around other people. It's the kind of relational challenges or other people's perception of how my brain works. I think that's where the challenges start to come in. If it's just like me in a room by myself doing my thing, using my autistic brain and, just existing in the world, like there's no issue. The issue is in when people expect you to behave a different way or have issues with how you engage in conversation, issues with the level of eye contact or facial expressions that you're making. I think that's where the challenges come in.
And I'm not going to let you dip from your revelation that you worked in a bar in Soho. So I want to know about that. How did that come about, and why did you transition away from it?
Moved up to London for university. My first degree attempt was nursing. I quit that after a semester. Then I started working in a psychiatric hospital for teenagers, but that was like 12 hours and it was in Surrey. So it was like working 8 to 8 hour shifts. But so although I loved the job, I just, there was a limit time what I just kind of was like, I can't do this anymore. So I got a job working at the World's End and Underworld in Camden, which was like where loads of gigs and things were on. And I was working there, and I was just kind of on that scene, like the rock metal scene. And then a couple of guys I'd met through that scene had opened up a bar, and I was just going and drinking in there. And then they were like, how do you feel about working here? And I was like, yeah, great. So I just started doing that, and then ended up going off to New York for a couple of years. But then I came back. They offered me a job as the bar manager there. And I mean, it was great. It's, one of the few places in Soho that has a late drinking license, especially for that kind of crowd, for like the metal crowd. But you'd have all the music journalists in there drinking. You'd have all the touring bands coming in and like after they play a gig, hanging out. And, so I've got a lot of crazy stories about how band members behave.
And do you still listen to metal music?
A little bit, not a lot, but sometimes I put it on when I'm, in the kitchen and things, and Paul finds it hilarious, my partner, because he doesn't mind it. We actually went to some kind of quite heavy music gigs when we first got together, but he's really into jazz, like avant-garde jazz and things. So he's a DJ, he's really into that.
And what were your mornings like then? If you had mornings, if you ever woke up to see a morning?
Oh my gosh. So the bar would close at 3. We'd try and kick everyone out by 3:30. Then we'd be cleaning and cashing up and everything to like 4:30. 4 would be early to be done. And sometimes we just go home. You'd get the night bus home, and you'd be getting home as the sun was coming up. But sometimes, it'd just be one of those nights and we're like, okay, we're locking in, and we would just be drinking and partying till who knows what time in the morning, and just rolling out at 8 in the morning. There came a time when I started training in the therapies that I ended up doing, and sometimes I'd walk home. Especially I was training for the Yorkshire Three Peaks along the Caledonian Way. It's called the Caledonian Challenge, and it was 54 miles in 24 hours. And I was working the bar and, trying to train for that. So I just started walking home. And by this point, I was living in Wandsworth. So working in Soho and just walking home to Wandsworth, like walking along the Thames at 5 in the morning as the sun's coming up. It was just, I loved it. So, yeah. But essentially my mornings were kind of midday then. I think I always knew there was a limited amount of time that I could do that job for. I never saw it as something that I was going to do long term. And a big part of that was the hours of it. But great fun.
I think when I've had these conversations, and also from my own personal experience, there is such a pattern of party animals turned therapists turned early night, early riser kind
That's
of thing.
So funny.
What do you think that is? Do you think there's do you think it's an extreme personality thing, or do you think?
No, I tell you what I think it is. I think it's that we expect people who are in a therapeutic field of some kind to be very well behaved and not have a life or anything like that. And it just shocks us when we find out that actually we have lives.
Yeah, that might be it.
Yeah.
So if you could have a perfect morning, so you can be anywhere in the world, you can be with anyone, it can be a real morning, it can be an imagined morning, what would your ideal morning be?
I think it wouldn't be that far away from what my current mornings are. I'd maybe, because I there's this coffee shop here, I live in Margate, and there's this coffee shop that make the best coffee and have incredible food. So I do a lot of my morning stints work there, but they don't open till 8. So if I had my say in things, they would open earlier for me. They wouldn't have any Tom, Dick and Harry in there.
Private.
Just be me and them. And, I would just get to start work a little bit earlier. But I think everything else would pretty much be the same, because I have to say that environment really works for me. And the coffee's fantastic. The staff in there are just absolutely lovely. It's called Forts. So if anyone's ever in Margate and wants a good cafe to go to, head there. So I'd get my stint of writing and working done there, and then I just, head off and see my horse.
Oh, beautiful. Isn't that gorgeous that that's actually your mornings now?
Yeah.
That would be...
Yeah. When you said that, I was like, oh, would I want to be anywhere else? Not really. And in truth, there's times where we have gone to other places on holiday and I really missed it. But I think, one, it's just so great. But also, that's kind of when people talk about autistic people liking routine and needing routine, I was always like, yeah, I don't think that's one of the things that impacts me. But actually, it really does. So I think it's also that wanting to stick to my routine and what works for me.
And if you're on holiday and
Yeah.
you're staying in a hotel and there's a breakfast buffet, what is your strategy for your breakfast buffet?
Oh, I love this question. So what is my strategy? I'm trying to think, because we were in this situation last summer when we went away. I think I started off with like some yogurt and fruit.
Nice.
We were in Greece, so Greek yogurt, the fruit, incredible. And then I move on to breads and cheeses and like olive paste, that kind of thing. And then that's me.
You're not a cooked fried breakfast kind of
Not if
woman.
I'm on holiday. I don't usually I think I tend to switch to like lighter foods. Whereas if I'm here, yeah, absolutely. Scrambled eggs, beans, give me the lot. But also, I think it's also me not wanting to be that Brit abroad. Right. Because when you're in the hotel and you're looking around, you can literally spot, who's from Eastern Europe, who's from Scandinavia, who's British by the types of breakfast. So I think part of me rebels against, I'm not going to be that English person with a fry up.
And also if you're in Greece, then the honeys and the...
Yeah, exactly. I just think I just don't want to be eating that type of food when I'm there. Yeah.
And this is a question that I ask all my guests. Imagine that you have got to the end of your life, you're right at the end, and an angel or a spirit or whatever you believe in says to you, you can go back and you can live one morning from your life again. Now, it doesn't have to be like March 3rd. Like, it could just be a time period. What morning are you going back to?
Well, we had one the other day that was just lovely. And when I say morning, it's not like the whole thing. It's more like a moment in it. In bed, having coffee. Paul had his tea. Nelson came in and he just got in and had a snuggle. And it just feels like those, we've gone from that stage of parenting where he'd come in the bed every morning, at 5 and sleep a bit more with us. And then there was a stage where he wasn't coming in to sleep anymore, but he was still coming in for a morning cuddle. And then at some point he stopped doing that. But now, he'll still come in sometimes and just have a cuddle. And I think just that feeling is one that I'm conscious of moving away from now, as he heads into adolescence and teen years, like who knows what's going to happen there. So I think right now I feel like, oh, we might be losing that soon, So I'd probably want to come back to that. Just a morning cuddle with Nelson.
Oh, that is
Paul
gorgeous.
there as well, just the three of us getting on and not squabbling, I'll take it.
The precious moments where everyone's at peace.
Yeah.
This has been such a gorgeous chat, Maisie. If anybody wants to follow up on your work or wants to learn a little bit more about you, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, so you can get my podcast, The Maisie Hill Experience. There's a new episode every Wednesday. And so I think there's over like 270 episodes for you to get involved with. And my website is maisiehill.com. You can find details about the membership and the books. And I've got all sorts of stuff on the website. And then I'm on Instagram as well.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Maisie. This has been absolutely gorgeous.
It's been great. I've enjoyed it so much. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Before the Work Begins podcast with me, Jo Hutton. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you always get to hear the brand new episodes of this podcast. You can find me on Instagram at Jo Hutton Yoga and of course on Substack at Yoga for Tired People.